was taking his classes, and Madam Titi also. They were talking about on-premise, and users were confused, like, okay, who are these hybrid users, synced users? So I would like to explain that, and I'm still going to try my best to explain what on-prem is, so everybody will understand. Because in my class, both this week, both today and tomorrow, I'm going to be making use of on-prem, cloud. So I would like us to understand what on-prem and cloud is. So let's just go further. So this is my learning part for the day. So first of all, we are going to be talking about what is Microsoft Entra ID. So we are going to understand what it is. Then we are going to talk about Active Directory Domain Service. We are going to learn how to join a computer to Active Directory domain. Then we are going to talk about user types, both users on-premise and users in the cloud. Then I'm going to talk about external collaboration. Then I'm going to talk about guest users. Then I'm going to go into hybrid identity. So I'm going to explain how we can configure directory sync, such as Microsoft Entra Connect or Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync. So we are going to see the differences, and we are going to know the difference between device registration and device join. So let's go further. So this is Microsoft Entra ID. Funny enough, Microsoft Entra ID was formerly called Azure Active Directory. I could remember when I started my internship back then at 2022 in Hashem Limited, we had our classes whereby the first day in the morning, someone came, he taught us Active Directory. He called it Active Directory. Then the person was explaining OU, users, organization unit. I listened to it. Then I was able to pick something. Then later in the afternoon, another person came in again. Then the name was Azure Active Directory. So the person was now talking about Azure Active Directory. I was confused. I was asking, what was the difference between Azure Active Directory and 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 Active Directory itself? So our CTO now came in. She was asking us some questions like, what is the difference between Active Directory? What is the difference between Active Directory? She now discovered that we didn't really even have the knowledge of Active Directory. So she was now like, he should come back and throw more light on Active Directory so that we understand it. Why am I bringing that here? It's because Microsoft, they're intentional about changing the name from Azure Active Directory to Microsoft Entra ID because it's quite confusing. Because when you hear Active Directory, your mind may be going to, okay, what is even the difference between Active Directory and so Microsoft Entra ID is formerly known as Azure Active Directory. So it is an identity management platform. So what it does is that it helps you manage users in the cloud. This is Microsoft Cloud Identity Management Platform. That's Microsoft Entra ID. We can see you can integrate your on-premise infrastructure. This whole picture here serves as on-premise infrastructure, which we are going to look at. We are going to understand what on-premise infrastructure is. We are going to see Active Directory. We are going to see how we can provision users. Then Microsoft Entra ID also can manage devices. But although if you want to go into deep device management, Intune is the tool that is recommended for deep device management, while you can also manage SaaS apps and cloud infrastructure. So you can manage users through different means, either from HR system, external identities, meaning that users that are not in your organization, those outside of your organization, you can manage them. You can also manage workload identity. So now let's look at Active Directory Domain Services. So we can see Active Directory Domain Services. So Active Directory Domain Services is more or less like the on-prem version of Microsoft Entra ID. So it's the on-prem version of Microsoft Entra ID. So Active Directory is an analytical software that stores information about objects on the network. So more or less like the way Entra ID stores information of users, devices, contacts. So that is how Active Directory also stores these devices. So it consists of schema. So for the schema is what defines the classes and object and attribute contained in the directory, while we have the global catalog that contains information about every object in the directory. Then we now go further to the query and replication service. So replication service is more or less like if you want your environment to be in such a way that maybe anytime you want to run updates, maybe you want to run an update in any of your Active Directory, it's ideal or best practice you have two domain controllers so that when you are running updates on the other one, if it has to result to you shutting down, then you know that the second domain controller can service your users. That's one of the advantage of replication. Look at this picture here. This is a forest. So we are going to look at my own small forest today. Then inside the forest, we have different domains. So in this forest now, from this picture, we have two domains in this forest, which is domain 1 and domain 2. So domain 1 now have 3 OUs, while domain 2 has 2 OUs. So under it, we have the domain controller, which stores data, like we defined, then schema and all. So that's for domain controller. So now let's look at the AA security framework. This AA security framework is very important. So the first A stands for authentication. So what this, I know Madam Titi has done justice to authentication, even Joseph has done justice to authentication, but I was just like, okay, since I'm talking about Entra ID and I want to, so I just feel like, okay, there's still need for me to still throw more light on it because I remember Madam Titi really laid emphasis on authentication, authorization, and accounting during our own section. So authentication is actually identity verification using one or more factors, such as if you want to log into your Gmail account. Now, let me use Gmail. You need your username, you need your password. So that is authentication, just an identification process whereby you can be able to access you can be able to log in and access your Gmail. Why authorization? So authorization now boils down to permission or scope for authenticated identity. So authorization is after you have logged in, what resources do you have access to? What permission do you have access to after logging in? Then accounting now is such a way that whereby, like the name implies, when we hear accounting, we know accounting is all about record management. So these 3A frameworks works in both Active Directory on-prem and Microsoft Entra ID in the cloud. So because it helps you manage authentication, it didn't just stop there by managing authentication, it still went further to manage authorization, then accounting, whereby keeping record of successful and failed authentication. In Active Directory, if you go to Event Viewer, if a user is trying to log in and they are putting the wrong password, all those events are logged. They are logged. The admin can always go there and check, okay, what's happening? Why is this person always putting wrong password? So you can call the attention of the user, or maybe if possible disable the user account because you don't know if it's an hacker that is trying to log into the user account. So now we can now go further. Like we are going to do all the last bit. I just want us to do theories. Then after theories, we jump into the lab. So first of all, joining a computer to the domain, there are certain things that we need to know while joining the computer to the domain. So the client edition, when I mean client edition, I'm talking about, let's see, at least most of us are familiar with Windows 10 Pro. We have education version, we have enterprise. So enterprise is for big organizations, while professional, maybe you can just buy the license and install on your operating system. So operating systems that can be joined to a domain is professional, education, and enterprise. So you
Excuse
can
me,
use you
excuse
can
me,
use
Emmanuel.
home.
Hi,
Yeah,
Emmanuel.
yeah.
Please, the audience said you should take it a bit easier than the speed you are taking at the moment.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So first of all, okay. So we have joining computer to the domain. So joining computer to the domain now, there are several things that you need to consider when you want to join computer to the domain. So first of all, because each of our systems, like our hardware, what is being installed is operating system. So that operating system, if you're installing operating system, you'll find out where you get editions. So we have different editions. We have Windows 10 Pro. If it's Windows 10 you're installing, if it's Windows 11, we have Windows 11 Pro. So depending on the operating system, whether Windows 10 or Windows 11. Then after that, we have other editions such as enterprise or education. So, but some users now that bought maybe home edition. So with home edition, you cannot actually join a home edition OS to a domain. So the client editions are professional, education, and enterprise. Then the next thing that is very important is the computer has to be connected to a local network with access to the domain controller. So in this scenario, what it means is that that computer need to have network connectivity to the domain controller. So it is that network connectivity that it has to the domain controller that will enable you to join that computer to the domain. Sometimes working in the office, I may want to like join a system to the domain. It will tell me that the domain controller is not available. So I will now check. There was a time I was checking. I was like, why am I getting this error? I now discovered that the person is actually connected to his own network. a network that is not connected to the company domain controller. So it is very important, even while troubleshooting, while working, to know that for you to join a computer to the domain, it has to be connected to a local network with access to the domain controller. There have to be access to the domain controller. If that domain controller is sitting in Azure, there have to be point to site VPN on that client machine before it can be able to, before you can join it to the domain, because there have to be communication between the computer and the domain controller. Why? Another important point again we need to notice that the clock time must be within 5 minutes. 5 minutes of the domain controller clock, meaning that, let's say for instance now, I want to join the computer to the domain and the time is 8 o'clock. And that computer, the time is, let's say, 7:50. It means that it won't work. They have to be either the same time or at least 5 minutes difference between the domain controller. Why the next thing is you need to set a name for the computer. So because if you are joining the computer to the domain, it is important you create a name for the computer. Like you put a name that aligns with the organizational naming convention. Because it's good for, maybe for instance now, let's say you have different units like account, admin, HR. So it's good if you want to name your computer, you can say HR01, maybe HR01, maybe the head of HR, HR02, maybe the junior HR or so. So these are the things that we need to consider when joining a computer to the domain. So all these things are very important that we need to note, we need to consider. One, the client edition is very important. If you are using home edition, you can't join it to a domain. You can only use professional, education, and enterprise. Then another one, it has to be connected to the local network with access to the domain controller. That's very important. That's even one of the most important things, because if there's no connectivity between that computer and the domain controller, it won't work. Then another one, time difference. So the time difference has to be within 5 minutes for you to join that computer to the domain controller. Why another thing is you need to set a name for the domain controller for proper identification when you sign into the domain controller, so that you will even know who has this computer. So another thing again we need to look at is user types. So we have two types of users. Not only two types of users, but in this context, I just want us to look at two types of users. One, we have internal users. So simple and short. Internal are users that are created in your tenant. When I say tenant, in your subscription, let's say your own environment. Internal users, they are users that are created in your own environment. So that's internal users. While external users are users from another environment that are not in your environment, or from another tenant. Why the MSC is just Microsoft account. So they are users with Microsoft account. They are also external users, because there are some users that they have Outlook accounts and you want to collaborate with them. You can as well collaborate with them. They are external users. But users that are having maybe an account that have a custom domain name, so those, or maybe an account that is from a subscription or from a tenant, those are from another tenant that want to collaborate with you. So those are the external users that are from another tenant that we are trying to explain. So that's the two types of users you have: internal users and external users, which we are going to look at in a broad frame. So for external collaboration now, so within your Active Directory, you can collaborate with partners. You can collaborate with partners. Maybe you have partners, people that are working with you in another environment. You can collaborate with people with Microsoft accounts, just Microsoft accounts alone. You can collaborate with them. You can collaborate with people on GitHub. You can collaborate with people on LinkedIn. So, so for guest users, you can collaborate, you can manage. So now we'll just go to the demonstration so that we'll look at Active Directory. We'll look at joining computers to the domain. We'll look at creating users in Active Directory and also in Entra ID. Then we'll look at external collaboration and guest users, how we can marry all these things together and get something. So let's go. Let's go. Let me just bring in my lab. So welcome to my small environment. This is my environment here. So let me explain this environment so that it will be easy. So I remember, like, this is actually Hyper-V environment. So what I did was that I created an operating system. Why I use Hyper-V is because most of us we are using Windows systems. So if you are using a system that is virtualization enabled, you can as well install Hyper-V role on your system so that you can create virtual machines on your system. So you don't need to, like, one of the advantage of virtual machine, one of the advantage of Hyper-V is that it enables you to create resources on an existing resources. I have the operating system now. This is the host operating system. This is the host operating system. Okay, sir. Mr. Emmanuel, you can go ahead, sir.
Emmanuel, yeah. So probably because of the way you are sharing your screen, it's a bit small. So is there a way you can zoom in?
Okay, let me see. Let me see if there's a way I can.
So while you are trying to do that, also, Emmanuel, please,
Yeah.
please put your leg on the brake a bit. Your speed is high. Thank you.
Is it better now? Hello? Is it
Mm. Yeah, it's a bit better. Sorry, Emmanuel. Um,
ma?
can you just give me 10 minutes? Just 10 minutes. Just 10
Oh,
minutes. Just borrow me 10 minutes, please.
yes,
I'll
ma.
be
You have the
responding.
floor.
Yeah.
You have the floor,
All
ma.
right. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Just a quick one. Please, how many of us here are hearing Windows Active Directory for the first time? Please, can you indicate in the chat window? I know we've heard about Microsoft Entra, but if this is your first time of hearing anything about Windows Active Directory, please can you indicate maybe with a yes or with a one? Let's just see, or probably maybe you raise your hand so we can see a number here. Okay, all right. Okay. Mhm. So the reason why I'm asking is because I want to be sure. So see, one person is even raising two hands. This is my first time. So we should rather take it very, very slow with them. Um, okay, all right, great. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. So let me give you a little bit of background so that, I mean, a background that can help you to understand all the things that Emmanuel has been saying since. So let's say you just think of the Windows Active Directory like a big library, a library where you have everything organized. Everything is organized neatly. So in this library, you have details or records of every book inside of it. You have records of who can borrow them and even who has borrowed them in the past. But instead of books right now, we are talking about what the Windows Active Directory keeps track of is actually computers, users, and other resources, like probably your printer within an organization. Now, one of the things you need to first understand is that before the cloud ever came, before we even talk about cloud, so before they talked about cloud computing to you, there was something that was called on-premise infrastructure. On-premise infrastructure means that in a layman, the same setup you have in your organization. I don't know if some of you, even if you haven't been to any organization, the truth about it is that for a setup typically that would be in any company today will be a setup such that you can have what we called a server and a client. And if you hear the word from a server, think of it as something that is always giving what um, serving or responding to requests for people. And think also of a client as something that is always what asking for resources or requesting. So a server will always what respond to requests. A client will do what will always request for a resource. Should just think about it that way. Now, an Active Directory is actually a server. And what kind of server is it on the network? It is responding, apart from keeping, remember the first example I gave you, it keeps tracks of the computers, of the users and other resources on the network. So some of other resources are things like your printers, you get. It can keep track of it. But other than keeping track of those resources, it can also do what? Respond to requests. And what kind of request will it respond to? A response such as what? Authentication. That is, I want to verify my identity on the network. The same thing you do. So just think about that from an on-premise environment. When we use the word on-premise environment, is a typical setup that any organization we have, where they have a list of server that is responding to requests, and then they have also what? Clients that are requesting for resources on the network. Just think of that. And then when you think of that, at the back end or at the backbone of all of those things that tie the servers and the client together is what you refer to as what? As network. And when you talk about network, you will see the networking team of the organization. You will see things like cables, like switches, like routers that are connecting every system on that network to be able to talk to each other. So that is what we have as what? An on-premise environment setup. So before the cloud ever came in, you have that scenario where every user on the network needs to say or verify their identity. And the only way they can verify their identity is through what? The Windows Active Directory. So you understand now with the scenario I've given you, just like the same way you go to, if I remember that I finished from Yabatech, when I go into our library, I have to take my ID card to say I am still a bona fide student of Yabatech. I have my ID with me, and with that ID, they will collect it and I can have access to the library. What does the library take care of? It takes tracks of the book that I read or I want to borrow. So the same thing is what the Windows Active Directory, that is what it does. So every computers you have on your network, every users that are created on the network, everything that is like a printer on the network, your Windows Active Directory does what? It takes care of it. It takes care of it, and then it takes inventory of it. It tracks it. Now, the next thing that will now happen is this. Apart from that, taking care of it, which is what the three, maybe Emmanuel, you can do me a favor of going back to your 3 slides of the AAA. Now, the other thing it does is that apart from taking care of it, it does what? It does an authentication. It means this. Identity, we all talked about it, is what, from the word identity, it's what verifies a user on the network, or it verifies who you say you are. That is what identity is. You can today, for you to log on to your Gmail, the Gmail server needs to verify that yes, you have an email address and you do what? You have a password. So when you talk about identity, it is something that gives or that makes you know what an object, we use the word an object, is on the network. So a bit of a fast track, or some few steps back, let me use the right word. A few steps back, when we talk about those users, those computers, all of those things on the network, in Active Directory, they are known as what? As an object. So if I use the word an object in Active Directory, it could mean that I'm saying a user. It could mean that I'm referring to a computer. It could mean I'm referring to a printer. So have that at the back of your mind. Now, for every object on the network, their identity needs to be verified. And that is why Active Directory does what is called what? An authentication. If you are someone today, if you log on to your machine and maybe you go to your network and you put username and password, and probably maybe, I know Emmanuel made use of the word domain. I think I'll come to that because I wanted to break it down a little bit for you guys so that it can be a bit easier for you. So, but I'll come to domain. Let me not go there yet. Now, at the point where you put in your username and password, remember what I said before. I said on a typical setup, You have the servers, you have the clients. You as a client on your machine, you're putting your username and password. Now, there is a cable, or whether it is a wireless connectivity, that is connecting you through the switches, the routers. Remember that I said there is a backbone to all of these connections between the servers and the client. These are what your switches on the network, your cables and all of that. At the point where I put that username and password, that net connectivity allows that communication or that thing I have put on my machine to travel to my what? To my Windows Active Directory server, because I am making a request at that time that please authenticate me or verify my identity so I can log into the network. So at that point, the Active Directory recognizes me and said, yes, I have your what? Your username and your password in my database. That is what we call it, directory. Think of it as a typical word, as a typical phone directory. If I ask you today, what will you see in a phone directory? You will be seeing username, you will be seeing first name, last name, phone address, house address, all of those things. Those are kind of records that you have in a directory. The same kind of record you will have in in an Active Directory environment or in an Active Directory server. So it takes that information and look through his database that says, okay, oh, there is someone that is called Olajumoke, and then yes, and this password is in my directory. So he allows me in, and then that is the very first task that an Active Directory does. It does what? It authenticates me, allow me to log on. Now, beyond that, let's say at the point where I have logged into my system, there is what is called a file server. Remember, I said there are multiple servers on the network. So I have another file server on the network, which I want to access. It means I want to access the resources at that time. At that point where I go to that file server to say, oh, I want to access my resource, the Active Directory will do another thing again. You will say, oh, do I have the permission for me to be able to access any resources or any file in that file server? Immediately it sees that I can have that access. It does what? It allows me. So that process is called what? Authorization. Then the last thing it does is that everybody that has accessed something on the network in one way or the other, maybe I access a file server today, and then the next day I access an email server, it allows the administrator, so the person that keeps like a monitoring of everything that happens on the network, to check who has accessed this or who has not accessed this and all of that. And that process is what called accounting. Another word we use for that accounting sometimes is what is auditing. So you understand what a Windows Active Directory right now is on premise. So let's now go into the future. Microsoft, people now started looking at, so take a typical Nigeria environment as an example. Now, in a typical environment of Nigeria, one day we have problem with power. All my servers on the network, everything shut down. By the time they come up again, everything is not responding again. Maybe some are responding, some are not responding. So you have organization going through all this ordeal. Sometimes maybe there is flood, and then people cannot go to their office, so people cannot do work and all of that. Or probably maybe the road into their office building is flooded, so even water has even entered into the building, so you find that they cannot even work. Now, Microsoft started thinking, not only Microsoft, other cloud vendors or providers started thinking. They look at the way, is it possible that we can also provide these same services that people are using on-premise and put it in what we call a cloud? Do you get? So Microsoft came up with its own cloud platform, which is called what? Microsoft Azure, right? Amazon came up with his own. Google came up with his own. So you have different kinds of cloud platform. But again, the same way you access resources on the network and you are being required to put username and password, you also want to access resources in that same cloud. And you'll be required to put what? Username and password. And that was why Microsoft now decided that, okay, you're coming to my own cloud, which is what? Azure. But before you access any resources, I have to provide what is called an identity server. And my own identity server will be called what? Microsoft Entra. Do you get it now? Now, Microsoft Entra, it is similar to your Windows Active Directory on-premise, but however, right now, it is now in the cloud. It will allow you now to access resources in the cloud, because for you to be able to exist in the cloud also, you will need a username, you will need a password, you need computers, you need, all of those things. So what now Microsoft Entra allows you to do is that is now your identity server. So I'm just going to lay that background for you, and I believe that going forward, Emmanuel can build on it. So Emmanuel, I beg you, please slow down for them. Slow down for them. So I hope that helps. Thank you. I'm sorry if I take much more than your time. Yeah.
Thank you very
Please
much,
go on.
Ma. Thank you very much, Ma. Thanks for that light. Thank you, Ma. Okay. So I believe the screen is better now. So Mr. So let me just see how I can see 100. Okay. So this is my own environment. So it's actually on-prem, like MJ explained. So this is more or less like on-prem now. So in this my own on-prem environment, which could be a server in your own environment. So what I did was, for me to install additional operating system, I have to enable virtualization on this machine. So I added Hyper-V. So I added Hyper-V. I just came to tools. So like everybody working in his workshop, like let me use a mechanic as an example. So if you go to a mechanic store now that maybe you want to fix a car, or maybe you want to fix your car. So first of all, the mechanic brings out his toolbox. So if the mechanic brings out his toolbox, it's going to like go, maybe if you want to use spanner, it picks a spanner. If you want to use, let's say, any other tool, it can pick it. So that is how in Server Manager here, you can also come to tools, just like a mechanic. You can access all the tools you have. So among all the tools I have here, now I have DHCP, because I added DHCP role. It's DHCP that's actually issuing IPs to the VMs on Hyper-V. So I have different roles here. So the role I added was Hyper-V role. So if you want to add Hyper-V role and you want to do it from the GUI, so thank you, MJ. Thank you very much, Ma. So I don't know, am I too fast, or should I reduce the hello?
Hi, Emmanuel.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, you
okay.
can just take it slowly. We have so many persons here are beginners, right? So just take it
Oh, okay.
slowly. Yeah, you're communicating anyways. You're doing well. Thank you.
Okay. So I just want to show us how
Emmanuel,
to Ma.
sorry, I think what you should do is this. I think it's your picture. So there is two things. I think because of the overlay of your video, of your picture, is making what you how will I put it? What you're presenting slower. I mean, what you're presenting is not making it come out the way it should come out very well. So they are struggling to see what
Okay.
you, yeah. So
Okay, Ma.
probably maybe you have to zoom out more for them.
Okay, Ma.
Yeah. Right.
So I think individual can also zoom out by themselves too, just to make it closer to their screens, especially for those that are using phones.
There might not be no. So if you look at where Emmanuel's name is, you have a plus sign. Where Emmanuel's name is on the screen, you can see there's a plus sign, so you can zoom it out yourself. Some of them may not know. You can zoom out with the plus sign, and then it will zoom out for you. All right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much, Ma. So let me go next. Then you have to select the role you want to install, either a role-based or feature-based or remote desktop service-based. So this is basically from the definition here. So you have to select an installation type whenever you want to install, because actually you are installing a role on the server. So it's more or less like we are looking at, this is a virtual machine, but let us look at it as a physical machine. So you go next. So you select the server. So among the server, if I have other servers that are added to this server, it will show. But now I only have just this server. And this is the IP address of the server. So I'll just go next. So I will now have to select the role I want to install. So you can see here, Hyper-V role has been installed already on this server. And I have DHCP role installed on this server. So that is when we want to add role to a server. So if you want to add a role, maybe you're having a Windows 10, computer, you can also add Hyper-V role. All you just need to do is to go to, just search for add role, just search for add roles. So once you search for add roles on your system, or you go to control panel, you can add additional role to your system. So I will show you when I sign into my client machine, so that we are going to see how we can add Hyper-V role to our system. So from here now, these are the roles I've added. So let me just cancel because I've already added the role. So now what I want to manage is I want to go to Hyper-V so that I can have access to the VMs I have here. All I just need to do is to go to tools. From tools, if I check all the tools I have here, the best option that takes me to my VMs is Hyper-V Manager. I can just click on Hyper-V Manager slowly. So let me just, it's a bit. So here now I have 4 VMs here. So this is a member server. I turn this off. So this is my domain controller. This is a client machine. This is another client machine. This client machine here has been joined to the domain. Why this? No, this one has been joined to the domain. This one has not been joined to the domain. I intentionally did not join this one to the domain so that I'm going to show us how we can join the computer to the domain. So I'm going to show, like I made mention that the client has to be on the same network with the domain controller. So this is an Hyper-V environment. So once you add Hyper-V role, some of the post-installation tasks that you will do is to create a switch. If you want to create a switch, you can create it from, let's say you click on Switch Manager. Once you click on Virtual Switch Manager, then you have 3 types of switch you can create. Like you have external switch, internal switch, and private switch. So the first one, which is external switch, what it means is that the VMs can communicate with themselves. They can communicate with themselves. This VM, this VM, this VM can communicate with itself, can also communicate with the host, and as well as communicate with external network. So that's for external switch, as the name implies. So while the next one, which is internal switch, they can communicate with themselves and the host, but they cannot go outside. So that's internal switch. While for private switch, the VMs can only communicate with themselves. So here I have internal switch alone because I only just want the VMs to communicate with themselves and the host. I don't want them to communicate outside the network. So now I will just I will connect to the domain controller. So if I after connecting to the domain controller now, so let's see how a AD environment looks like. So now, just like I explained before, so basically this is a domain controller. But if you want, maybe after you have added Hyper-V role to your Windows 10 computer or Windows 11, and you want to install ADDS role, because the role is actually ADDS. MJ did justice to what ADDS is and how you can use ADDS to manage objects. So now I've already added ADDS role in my environment. So if you want to do same in your own environment, because I've done same, if I say maybe I should go and start the addition in this particular section, it might take a while. Like maybe we may even stay more than this. So let me just show us how we can add it. Just same. If you want to add the role, you click on manage. Once you click on manage, you can add roles and feature from here. Or better still, if you don't want to go through this route, you can come to the dashboard. Once you click on the dashboard, under configure this server, you have the same options here: add roles and features, add other servers to manage. So once you click on add roles and features here, so it brings you the same steps. You go, you see, before you begin, it's like my CTO always tell me, anytime you want to do all these things, make sure you read everything that is here. She will say, make sure you read it. It's not about just clicking next, next, next. So this is before you begin now. They are telling you what you will do. This is what you need to know before you begin. The administrator account has a strong password. Network settings such as static IP needs to be configured, which all these things has been done already. So you just go next, then you select the installation type. So we can see from the reading here, the installation, you can install rules and features on a running physical computer or virtual machine. So right now we are configuring a single server by adding roles and features. So what we are doing is we are adding this role on this server. We are not adding it on the virtual machine. That's why we are clicking this particular option. So if we go next, we'll now see the server type. So this is the server here. So once we go next on this server, then we will now see the roles and features that have been installed. Just like on the Hyper-V host. The Hyper-V host now, let's not confuse ourselves. So what an Hyper-V host is more or less like a server that is having Hyper-V role. So Hyper-V role now is a role that have been installed on this server. So because Hyper-V role has been installed on this server, it is an Hyper-V host. It's just like a server that is having Hyper-V role. Like MJ explained, like you have physical servers in your environment. Let me use this example. Let's say servers now are very expensive because if you want to buy all those HP ProLiant servers, you discover that they are like almost millions of naira. So some organization, what they do is that they'll just buy one, then they add Hyper-V role to the server so that they can install additional virtual machine on that server. One, to save cost. I remember when I started my program, they gave us an assignment to go and learn what is Hyper-V. It took us a lot of time to understand what Hyper-V is. But when it was explained, I really understood what Hyper-V is when I saw the advantages and what Hyper-V can do. So we can see what Hyper-V can do. So this is an operating system now. This is an OS, an operating system. But I'm having additional computers running on the operating system. It's saving me cost. If additionally I want to go and buy other systems to do this, it won't be easy for me. So that is one of the advantages of Hyper-V, both to organizations and to we as individuals. So now let's connect. We are already connected to the domain controller. So let me just go back to the domain controller. So this is my domain controller now. We have confirmed the rules that are installed. Domain controller, Active Directory domain services has been installed. DNS server has been installed. So let me just close it. So now, like I made mention before, so if you log into a server, if you look at the left here, the left-hand side, you could see all the roles that are installed. Test, ADDS. ADDS role has been installed. Then the next role is DNS. So DNS comes with ADDS installation. If you're adding ADDS role to a server, it automatically installs DNS role to the server. So if we want to manage users and computers now, just like MJ made mention of, in AD, you manage users, you manage computers, not you, and it also helps you do accounting and auditing. So let's go to tools. From tools now, we can see other tools. If we notice, when I was on the Hyper-V host, when I went to tools, some of these options were not there. Because I have ADDS here now, I have Active Directory Administrative Center, I have Domain and Trust, I have Active Directory module for Windows PowerShell. I have all these rows here that were not in the other server that I opened tools. So all I need to do is to just select Active Directory users and computer. So once I select it, it opens the settings for me. So all I need to do is to collapse my is to collapse the domain. So basically now, this is the domain. This is my domain now. This is my domain, like my own environment. Like MJ was mentioning the other time, like you have your domain, under your domain, you have users, you have computer objects, you have different containers. Some of the containers we have computer. So in this computer container now, I've added two servers to the domain, such as the first client's computer and this server I wanted to use as my AD Connect server, but I changed my mind, which I'm going to explain. I'm going to explain why I decided to use Cloud Sync over AD Connect. And I have organizational units, such as where I have this OU here for doctors, and I have this OU here for hospital admins. So let me just so this is basically a domain controller. So now what we are going to do now is we are going to be creating users in this domain controller. So just like with the way we create users in Microsoft Entra ID, we are going to create user here so that we are going to see how creation of users occur in on-premise environments and how creation of users occur both in the cloud environment. So let me collapse this Abuja Doctors now. If I collapse this Abuja Doctors, I have two OUs under this Abuja Doctors. So now the first OU is computers. In this computer OU, there's nothing here. So I'm going to show us how we can create an OU in, first of all, before we even create a user under the OU. So let me just create an OU. So if you want to create an OU, depending on where you want to create the OU, if I want to create the OU now under this Abuja Doctors, so I can just right click on Abuja Doctors, click on new. Then once I click on new, I'll see different things I can create. Like MJ made mention of, there are several things you can manage in a domain controller. You can see here we can create a computer. Not just only computer, we can create contacts, we can create groups, we can create iNet org persons, we can create MSDS shadow principal, and we can also create organization unit, we can create printers, we can create users, and we can create shared folders. But in this scenario now, I want us to create an organizational unit under Abuja Doctors. Let's say this OU now, I'll call it, let's say, let me say Abuja Nurses. So basically what OU is OU is just like the structure of your organization. So in our subsequent slide, I'm going to explain what an OU is fully, like we're going to understand it, but I just want to show us because before we create users, I want us to show us how we can create users in an OU. So basically now I've created this OU. So all I need to do if I want to create users on this OU now is to right click on the OU, then click on new. So once I click on new, it takes me to, I'll now go to any of the options I want. If I want to create a group under this OU, I'll click on group, but I want to create a user. So now, this now brings me to the settings that MJ was making mention of, where you have your username. So your username now, that's what you'll be using to log in. Then the administrator will be the one that will define the name that you use to log in. So first of all, now let's say this person now that is logging, his name is, let's say his name is Tony. So his first name is Tony. Let's say his last name is, let's say, let's say Ahmed. Let's say his name is Tony Ahmed. So Tony Ahmed now, his first name is Tony, his last name is Ahmed. Let me change it. So his last name is Ahmed. Then the user logon name now. So this user logon name now, depending on the organization, some organization they set their own user logon name as maybe Tony A, for example. So let's say for instance now you set your user logon name as Tony A. Maybe you are in the north where you have different people bearing the same name, such as Mohammed, where you have a lot of Mohammed in an organization. What it means is that you need to work on the way you give your users their user logon name in your environment. So that's why user logon name is very important, because even from the beginning of an organization, it needs to be structured. So some organization will say, okay, the user logon name will be the first name and maybe maybe the first two letters of the surname. So just like maybe I can use that. Tony is the first name. Then I'm now adding AH, which is the last name of the user. So I will now click on next. So once I click on next, it's asked me for a password. So for you to log in now to your computer in a domain, so you need a username, you need a password. So I can define this password from here. Let me just give it a simple password and another one. So now, so there are options you can set. For security best practice, user must change password is good, because as an admin, you are not supposed to know the user password. So it's ideal or best practice when a user logs in, as soon as they just sign in, it tells the user to change their password. So I'll just click on next, then that's all, finished. So I'm done creating this user. So now let's say, I remember when I was doing my training, we were given a task to create bulk users. Like we should create up to, like, let's say 200 users in an OU, which happens because you could want to work in an environment where they have a lot of users, and in that scenario, you can't be creating the users one by one. Just like the way I came here, I right click, I say new, I clicked on new, I went to users. It may take a while. It won't even be easy for you as the admin. So there are ways we can automate this, such as bulk users creation. So I remember that time it was very technical, it was very difficult. We were like, how are we going to do it? During the class, I remember it was even MJ that took us that class. She was like, we have to create users, like 200 users. Like we're like, but before she gave us that particular task, she gave us the foundation of what to do, how we could use concatenate in Excel, so that if you have the username, the first name and the last name, you could use concatenate to match particular columns so that it could be easy. So that was even the first time I even heard about concatenate for the first time. So that's part of the ways that we can actually create users. So let's just show a demo on how we can create bulk users, so that at least in a real life scenario, should in case maybe you are given a task to create maybe multiple users in an Active Directory environment, you will still be able to do that. So let me just open my desktop so that I can show us the Excel sheet that I have here. So let me just bring it to this other screen. Let me make it big. Let me just So now I have users here that I want to create. I've been given a task now by my HR to create all these users at once. So now in creating all these users at once, I have all of them here listed. Maybe what the HR will give me most times is just the first name and last name. So with the first name and last name, like I explained the other time, the username or the UPN you give the user is very important, because UPN sometimes can be confusing when you have people that have the same name, like most especially our Northern brothers, where they have people bearing the same name. So you could say, okay, UPN will be first name and first two letters of the last name, just as what I in a user. This part now is the OU where the user will be, because if you don't specify a path, the user will just be created in the default container, in the user container here, where we have users here. If you don't specify a path, they will be created under the user container. So in this case, I intentionally want to create them under the user container, so that we are going to learn how to move users from one OU to another OU. So once we go next now, we'll see we have UPNs. These are the settings that I defined on my Excel sheet. Then I have the password that I've given them. This is the password column. Then I have the email. So now let me copy this Excel sheet. I've already copied it and I've pasted it in the lab. So let me just open the lab so that we could look at how we could create bulk users. So now I'm back to the lab. Let me open the folder where I pasted it. So I pasted the Excel sheet in the download folder here. This is aduser.csv, because I want to create 4 users at once in my environment, because it's very important and the task has been given to me that I have to create them immediately within maybe 5 minutes or so. So all I just need to do is to come to PowerShell. So PowerShell basically is where you run command, you run action, and is where you run command, like you tell the computer what to do and the computer executes the command that you want it to run. Here now, like I showed up my CSV. So there are particular parameters that I need to define, so which I've defined in my CSV. So first of all, this is a variable that is referring to the path. So this is variable that is referring to users. So what is actually this variable is actually doing is importing CSV from this path, which is the download path where I saved the script. Then we have other lines. So this description here now, why I put this description here is because, for instance, now let's say you want to do auditing in your environment. You want to know who created users and the date that the users were created. I just use this to specify the date in the description, the date the user was created, and the administrator that created the user. So for each, this is actually referring to what I have in the Excel sheet. So I have display name, I have username, I have the OU where the user is going to be. I have the UPN, I have the description, then I have the email. Now, the command now that is actually doing that creation is this new AD user. So this new now is the now is is because the way PowerShell it works with verb now. So the verb here is new. Why the noun is AD user. So the verb is the action word, like our English teacher taught us then that a verb is an action word. So the verb noun is new. So that's what we have here, new. So new AD user. So the AD user I'm creating, I have to specify some parameters, which there are some parameters that are very important. One of the parameters here is name. Then the next parameter is display name, then followed by the SAM account name, which all this has been has been has already been described in a variable. So this is the variable I use to specify those things. So the display name now, go and get the display name from the Excel. So that's just the way this particular script is designed to run. So I'm going to share this script, should in case you want to try it in your lab to practice it, it's going to work the same way. So all I just need to do is to just run the command. So if I want to run the command, I'm using PowerShell ISE to run this command. So if I want to run the command, I'll just click on the play button here. So the command has been executed successfully. So if I was getting any errors, it means that the command failed. So for me to confirm if the users has been created, first of all, let me open the Excel sheet so that we'll find out the users. So one of the users we have here is John Doe, Janet Jones, Hakim Jackson, and Grace Lee. So let me go back to my domain let me go back to users and computers. Let me see if I have those users there. So here now, if I refresh this page, I should see them here. So from here now, I have Hakim Jackson, I have Janet Jones, and I have Johnny Doe. So now, all I need to do is, I want to move these users now that has been created here to another OU. I want to move them to I want to move them to under Abuja doctors. I want to move them to Abuja nurses. So it's all these users now, these 4 users I created now are actually nurses. So if you want to do bulk move at the same time, all you just need to do is to press your control button, click on the user, click on one of the users you want to move, just select them. Then where's the last user, which is Grizzly? You can just right click, then you click on move. Under what I want the OU now I want these users to be is Abuja doctors. All I need to do is to just collapse it, then select Abuja nurses, sorry, then hit OK. So those users now has been moved to Abuja nurses, whereby we have other users here before. So now we'll confirm because I would like us to check, because now we want to see how to know if a computer is joined to the domain or if a computer is not joined to the domain. So those of us logging in on our own system, please let us confirm if our computer is joined to the domain or if our computer is not joined to the domain on the chat. If you want to confirm if your computer is joined to the domain, there are several ways you could know. So one of the methods that I use is you can right click on the Windows key here. I don't know. Once you right click on the Windows key, from here, you just click on systems. So let's just follow so that we'll achieve the same result. So I want you to check your own computer where you are to see if your computer is named this way. Like if your computer is named this way, so that at least we'll know. So I want us to drop some charts, to drop some charts so you could check if you are logging in on your computer. So if your system is joined this way, it means that your computer is joined to the domain. So could we just check? Just right click on Windows key, then click on system. From system, you will know that your computer, you could confirm if your computer is joined to the domain before we go ahead to join our computer to the domain. So could we just confirm, please? So let's drop it on the chat so that we could actually. So if your computer is joined to the domain, you can just drop it on the chat so that We'll see. Okay, I have one person. Yours is domain joined. Okay, fine. So this computer actually is a domain joined computer. So one, we could see here that the computer, like I made mention before, is the name of the computer is CLO1. Then aside the name of the computer, is showing CLO1, is showing the fully qualified domain name of the computer, which is clo1.blossomhearthospital.allmicrosoft.com. So that is the name of the domain, and this is the installed RAM and all. So from device spec, you will know if your system is joined to the domain or not. And the other way we could know, if your system is really domain joined, you won't be able to know it with this method because it's only an administrator that will know if maybe probably the system is domain joined because you see it here, domain, meaning that it's actually joined to the domain. So now, like part of our key takeaways for this section is joining a computer to the domain, which I want to show us how we could join a computer to the domain straight up. So this computer now is an example of a computer that is joined to the domain. So let us add the other computer to the domain now. Let's see how we could join this CLO2 now that is not joined to the domain. So all we need to do is to connect to the machine. So once we connect to the machine now, I want us to see the difference between this computer and the other one. So let's see. All right, click, we'll go to systems. So from systems now, we could see it doesn't have the device name is generic, just like the name that comes with your operating system. Most times you just see the name just like this. So basically, you can know that the system is not domain joined from your device specification. You will know. Just in this way now, this system is actually in a work group. So if your system is not domain joined, it's either your system is domain joined or your system is in a work group. So this system basically now is in a work group. So I want us to join this system to a domain. So first of all, if you want to join a system to a domain, let me start afresh so that we'll be on the same page. So there are several ways. Either you come to the Windows key here, you could right click on the Windows key, you go to systems, then from systems, you come to advanced system settings. From advanced system settings, you get it. Or better still, you can also come from the file explorer here. So once we click on file explorer on our system, you just right click on this PC. Once you right click on this PC, you go to properties. You will also see the properties of the computer that you want to join to the domain. So now in joining this computer to the domain, if we remember, some of the prerequisites that we need is the time has to be at least 5 minutes. It doesn't have, it has to be within 5 minutes of the domain controller time. Then after that, the system has to be Windows, either Windows 10 Pro or either professional, enterprise, or education. My system now, the edition is Windows 10 Pro. So meaning that this system has the capability of the domain. So now all we need to do is to just come here, go to advanced system settings. From advanced system settings, now what we want to do, you can click on computer name. Once you click on computer name here, we could see that the computer is on a work group. It's either your computer is in a work group or your computer is in a domain. So you have to be one. You can't be in the two at the same time. Either you're in a work, the computer is in a work group or the computer is in a domain. So let me change this name now. So like I made mention, if you want to join a computer to the domain, you need to define a name. So let me just give this computer CLO2. Then I will now specify the domain that I want to join. All I just need to do is to put the fully qualified domain name of the domain or the net BIOS name. So here, let me put the fully qualified domain name. So, oh, I'm coming. So this is where we're actually supposed to put the fully qualified domain name. Let me put it again. So I'll just click on OK. So I'm getting this error that the domain controller could not be contacted. So let me see if there is an error in my name in the display name. So first of all, now we could troubleshoot this actually on this call. So basically, let's look at it. Let's check first if it's on the same network with my domain controller. So let me just go to control panel. Let me go to command prompts, or we could check from control panel, but let's just use command prompt to check it. So now to check if your computer is on the same network with your domain controller, first of all, let me run ipconfig /all. So now we could see the preferred IP is 192.168.192.169. So how I will know now if my computer is in the same network is from the subnet and from the DNS server. So the IP of my domain controller is 192.169.3.53. That's the IP of my domain controller. So now that I've specified this, so let me find out, let me look at it. It should be from my name, from the name of of okay. So let me just go back. Let me type it again. Okay, now it's worked. So first of all, I have to verify if the computer is actually on the same network with my domain controller. If it's not on the same network with my domain controller, there is no way I'll get this prompt to type in the admin username or password. So let me just type in administrator, then put the password, then hit OK. So we are going to see a welcome message. So the welcome message is welcome to blossomhearts.onmicrosoft.com domain. So that's the domain. That's my domain now that I joined this computer to. So that's just for joining the computer to the domain and actually creating users in the local Active Directory. So our key takeaways on the on-premise aspect was to create users in the on-premise domain controller and join the computer to the domain. So it's going to ask me for a restart. I'm going to restart now actually for the changes to complete. So I'll just minimize this virtual machine so that we could go back to the domain controller and do a recap of what we have done so far. So let it just load. So this is my AD. So first of all, this is my domain controller. So there are organization units in this domain controller. So organization unit defines the structure of an organization. So now, if anybody comes here and see Abuja Doctors, the person knows that people in this Abuja Doctors OU are actually doctors in Abuja. So that's the structure, just like the structure of the organization. So now we came here, we created users under our OUs, just like we created both one after we created in the GUI for one user and we created users in bulk. Then we joined our computer to the domain. So for us to even confirm if that computer has joined the domain successfully, it should show under computer OU. So here we have CLO2. Formerly we were having CLO1 and AD Connect. Now we have CLO2. So now let's go to Entra ID so we can create a user in Entra ID. I believe Joseph taught us how to create user in Entra ID, but let me just still go through it so that at least for those that were not in that class, they can still pick something from it. So now I'm an admin of my tenant. So if I want to log in to the portal, so like MJ made mention of in her explanation, so Active Directory is the local version of Entra ID in the cloud. So now we have looked at Active Directory now. We have seen how to create users in Active Directory. We have seen how to add a computer to the domain in Active Directory. Then we have seen how to create bulk users in Active Directory. So now let us look at Entra ID, which is why we are here. So let's just look at Entra ID so that we can see how to manage users in Entra ID. So that once our tenant has been created, we'll know how we can manage users in Entra ID. So let's come here now. So all I need to do, like the way I access my admin centers. So most times I just go to office.com, office.com. So once I hit enter from office.com, it welcomes me to Microsoft 365. So as it welcomes me to Microsoft 365, since I'm an admin, so if you log in and you are not as an admin, let's say you log into your environment, you log into Office 365. If you are not an admin, you won't see this admin icon here. It won't be here. So because I'm an admin, I have admin icon here. So let me just click on admin icon. So it brings me to Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So Microsoft 365 Admin Center now is the landing page once you click on admin. So, but I don't want us to look at Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I want us to go to the topic of the day, which is Microsoft Entra ID. So all I need to do is to click on identity. So we have several admin centers: security, compliance, endpoint manager, exchange, SharePoint, Teams. But my major concern here is identity. So I'll just click on identity so that we can see the difference: creating users in on-prem and creating users in. Then before we now look at hybrid identities, how we can move users from on-prem to the cloud. So now here we have my Entra ID portal. So just like the way we have users and computers. So let me just go to the overview of my tenant so that we are going to see some settings from the overview. On the overview of my tenant now, this is the name of the organization, Belgium Heart Hospital. I have 19 users. I have 27 groups. I have 21 applications. Then I have just 3 devices. So there are some configurations you need to do on Entra ID, such as privilege identity management. You need Microsoft Entra ID Premium plan. And if you want to do password write back, you need Microsoft ID Premium plan and other things. So Microsoft Entra Premium plan is needed for if you want to do settings, like if you want to manage your identity in a high standard. So you need Microsoft Entra ID Premium license to do that. So now I'm already in Entra ID Admin Center. First of all, I clicked on office.com. From office.com, I went to admin. Then from admin, I came to Microsoft 365 Admin Center. From Microsoft 365 Admin Center, I moved down to identity, which is what I want us to look at. So let me go back to identity. So in identity now, I can see the primary domain. This is the primary domain. Then if we scroll down, we'll see the tenant ID. So this is the tenant ID of my organization. So now let me go to users so that we could see users in Entra ID. So now if I click on users now, we could see I have different users in my environment. So if I want to create users now in my environment now, so basically all I need to do here is just like the way we have in our Active Directory. You could go click on new. Then once you click on new, you see you could create a new user or you could invite an existing user. But in Active Directory, if you want to create a user, first of all, you need to create an OU. So once you create an OU, right click, then you click on new. If you click on new in Active Directory, you will see more options than this. So here you only see new user or invite external user. So let me just do a quick creation of user so we could just see how we could create a user. So now for user principal name now, if I click on user principal name here, so let me say I want to give this user Alex. Let me say Alex. Alex. So Alex is the user principal name now. So if you could see some options for mail nickname. So for the display name now, let me just say Alex, Peter. So that's the display name of the user. So now it's either I can say I want password to be automatically generated or I create it on my own. So if I uncheck this, what it means is that I can type any password here of my choice, but I want password to be automatically generated. So I'll just click on password to be automatically generated. Then I will now go next. There are other properties that I can specify. So here now, the display name, I specified Alex Peter. So now if I come to properties, I can as well say, okay, the first name is Alex. Then the second name is, the last name is Peter. So Peter, Alex Peter. So now this guy now can either be a member or a guest. So I'm adding Alex Peter as a member. I'm not adding Alex Peter as a guest. So if maybe the person is in, let's say software, I could say software. I could say software department. Then let's say the company is, let's say hospital. Let me say hospital. Then department, let me say IT. So these are settings you could specify. Then manager, you could add a manager. Let's say if I want to add a manager now for organization structure, I can just pick, let's say, can pick this person as the manager. So let me just say this guy now, which is Alex Peter. So Bola is the manager, is the person managing Alex Peter. So there are other settings I could also specify. I could specify street address, city, state, zip code in creating users in Microsoft Entra ID. So if we go to assignments, so if I want to add this person to a group on the creation, so I can just add the person to a group, or I can give the person a role, which I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover group, I'm going to cover role. So I don't want us to just dwell too much on group and role because we have it coming. So let me just go next, then review and create. So now I'm creating this user. So I can just do create. So once I do create, if I refresh this page now, the user shows. So Alex Peter. So he's here as a member. So that is how we can create a user in the cloud and a user on-prem. Just like the way we created this single user, we can also create bulk users in the cloud also. So if we want to create bulk users in the cloud, we can just go to users, all users, then under all users, we'll see bulk operations. So if we want to do bulk operations, just click on the drop down. We can now say bulk create, bulk invite, or bulk delete. So what this bulk means is that you can do several things at the same time. So, but let me look at bulk create. Let's see the options it's going to bring. So for bulk create now, it's going to give you you can download a CSV template. So this is optional. So, but it is you download it, because if you don't download the template, you won't see an example of what you need to create. So let me download the template so we see what it looks like. So let me open this template. Let me open the folder. So let me just open it so that we'll see what's there. So I want to open it with Excel. So let me go to the folder where it's downloaded so that I can open it. So we'll see what's there. Oh. So let me open it. Although this is a server, so I didn't install Office application on the server. So for me to view it very well, I may need to copy it to my system. So let me copy it to my system where I have Excel installed. So let me just copy, then minimize. Let me just paste it here. So I could just open it. Okay. Just hold on. Oh, so it's here. So we have it here. So now, to create bulk users now, this is what you need to specify if you want to create bulk users. So you need this, you need you need the name. The name is required. So example, they haven't given you an example. So you could just say, if the user I want to create now is, let's say Emmanuel now, I can just clean this screen. I will say, let's say Emmanuel Ike. Then the user principal name now, I can as well go with the way I create users in my organization, Emmanuel IK. Then for the domain name now, I will need to actually change this domain name, because if I don't change this domain name and I actually upload this particular CSV, it will give me an error. So I could just change it to the name of my domain. Okay. So let me just enlarge it. So that's the name of my domain. So I can just go next. Then there are other settings I can also specify. So for password, I could just put a password of my choice. Then for if I want to block user sign in, I could either say yes if I want to block user sign in, but in this case, I could choose to say no. Then you could specify the first name, the last name, job title, department, usage location, depending on you. But if you don't want to, so long as all these are optional, it will still upload. So that's a way you can create bulk users in Entra ID, just like we were able to create bulk users in Active Directory on-prem. So that's for this first part of the course for today. So I don't know, Rafiah, is there any questions in the chat so that we could just trash the questions before we go, before we continue? Hello? So, hello, oh,
So you're audible.
oh, okay. Maybe I should just continue. Is there any question in the chat? So we could just answer it so we don't spend. Hello? Okay. So let me just continue. Yes, there's no question. So now let's go to hybrid identity.
Please hold on. I guess there are questions. Let me just check just to be sure. I want to zoom my screen so that I can see the chart. Just a second, please. So, do I start from beginning? Okay, so I will just pick the very few ones here, just so you can just lay emphasis on them before. So, can one have a Linux machine in Hyper-V? That's one question.
Okay. So yeah, you can have a Linux machine in Hyper-V. You can set it up. You can set up a Linux machine in Hyper-V. Yes, it's possible.
Okay, so someone is asking, can I can I run both home and pro version on the same computer?
It's not possible. You are either here or there. It's either you are using home or you are using pro. So you can't use the two at the same time. It's not possible.
Okay, I think MJ has been answering a lot of questions already. So
Okay.
I guess you can move on, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate. Thank you. So now we are in hybrid identity. So the major reason why I started from on-prem is because I believe that if I don't start from on-prem and I just jump into hybrid identity, some of us might be confused, like what is even this on-prem? So That was why I started from on-prem, and I really appreciate MJ for really throwing more light on on-prem so that at least we'll be able to understand what on-prem is. So on-prem now is more or less like the way we created users in the cloud. We created users in the cloud and we created users on-prem. So now it's possible for a user to exist on-prem and in the cloud. That is hybrid. That is just simply hybrid. For a user to exist on-prem and in the cloud, just like this line here, this horizontal, this horizontal line here. So this horizontal line here now is a demarcation between the cloud and on-prem. Like we can see, the cloud is high, while on-prem is below in your environment. So this on-prem now is in your environment. There are servers, like MJ made explanation on. There are servers that are in your environment. So they are on-prem. They are on-prem actually. So as it is like this now, you can have a user here that still replicates in the cloud. So for this to be possible, for you to be able to have hybrid user, so we are going to look at it and we are going to understand it. So let's just understand that hybrid identity in a very simple way is a user that exists on-prem and in the cloud. A user that is in the on-premise environment that we like the users we created on-prem now. So for them to exist both in on-prem and in the cloud, that's hybrid environment. So now in hybrid identity now, these are the things that we need to take cognizance of. One, I want to use modern authentication. So these are the questions you need to ask yourself if you are using hybrid identity. Who does the authorization? This who does the authorization, we are going to look at it when we are explaining the authentication types such as pass-through. I know Madam Titi explained it, so I'm just going to say something about it too. Then what about guest users? Then where is authentication performed? The authentication now, where is it performed? Is the authentication only performed in the on-premise or is performed both in the on-premise and in the in Entra ID? What it means is that okay, let's take Paraventure now. You have users that are hybrid. If your domain controller is down, let's say your domain controller, maybe you have power issue and your domain controller is off, will your users still be able to access Office applications? So those are the questions we are going to look at. How are device managed? Where is the user profile? But I want to use Kerberos. So this is we are going to really understand and the major reason why we are using hybrid identity. So let me just go further so that we don't, so that as we are explaining, we are going to answer all these questions. We are going to answer all these questions, then we'll get the check. So now, for us to use, for our users to use hybrid, or maybe for our users to be hybrid, we need a solution or a tool that can establish an handshake between the local Active Directory and Entra ID, because Entra Active Directory and Active Directory, there are two different solutions. Active Directory is on-premise, is local, while Entra ID is in the cloud. So for you to use Entra ID, for your users to be in Entra ID and for users to be in on-prem, there has to be something that will establish that handshake between your users on-prem and your users locally. So now we have Entra ID Connect Sync. So this Entra ID Connect Sync is one of the solutions that can help you achieve that. So it bridge on-premise Active Directory with cloud-based identity. So this whole English that is just here is more or less just talking like, okay, it helps you move users or it helps you synchronize these users from on-premise to the cloud. That is just what this Entra Connect. And Microsoft don't only have only Entra Connect. So they have like several tools that you can use to sync users from on-prem to the cloud, which we are going to look at. So the first one is Entra ID Connect. So this Entra ID Connect now, the way it works is like it's an application that you install and manage in your server on-premise. So in your on-premise server, that is where you manage the AD Connect itself. You define your synchronization, you define your filters. Okay, I want this OU to synchronize. I don't want this OU to synchronize to the cloud. You can do all that in your AD Connect using Entra ID Connect Sync server. So this one more or less like is more or less like an application you are installing on your server. So I'm going to explain the difference between Entra ID Connect and Cloud Sync because we are getting there. But I just want us to look at Entra ID Connect Sync. So this Entra ID Connect Sync now, if you want to establish a handshake so that your users on-prem can be managed in the cloud or to be seen in the cloud. So you need these two to actually achieve that. So let's go, let's see some other settings. So we can see now we have AD Connect. In the other diagram where we have hybrid, AD Connect is not here. So, but now we have on-prem, we have cloud. So AD Connect now has to be installed on-prem so that your on-premise users can show up in the cloud. That is hybrid identity. So let's look at other things. So I'm going to explain all these authentication types, password hash sync, password authentication, and federation. So I'm going to explain it. We are going to understand it. Let's just go. So now this brings me to Entra ID Connect Cloud Sync. So Entra ID Connect Cloud Sync now is an alternative of Entra ID Connect. So this one now is simpler, it's lightweight. So it's more or less like you are installing an agent in your environment. That agent does it establish a connection between your domain controller and the cloud. In AD Connect, you manage everything on-prem. So such as if you want to define filters, you want to let's say provision new users, or maybe you create a user now and you want the changes to show up even before the specified time that synchronization is supposed to take place. You could run start AD sync cycle so that you could actually move those users immediately after creation. Either you use Delta or Initial, which we are going to look at. But with Cloud Sync, everything manages in the cloud. You don't even need to run start AD sync cycle. Every synchronization happens minutes in seconds. So that's Cloud Sync. So why are we even talking about this? We talked about hybrid identity. So for you to have hybrid identity, you need a tool that can establish that hybrid connectivity between your on-premise server and the Entra ID environment. So that tool now, the first one we made mention of Entra ID Connect. Why the second one now we're talking about is Entra ID Cloud Sync. So let's look at Entra ID Cloud Sync. So for Entra ID Connect Cloud Sync now, one of the advantages is cloud first, and you can have multiple forests. So I'm going to explain with a scenario how multiple forests works so that we can see the advantage that Cloud Sync has over Entra ID. Because with AD Connect now, for you to install AD Connect in an environment, they have if they are in different forests and maybe you want to sync users in those forests, there have to be network connectivity between those two forests. But with Cloud Connect, it works on disconnected forests, just like we have here, multiple forests. All these forests, they are not connected to each other, but they can actually sync to the same tenants in the cloud using Cloud Sync. And sync happens quicker, unlike AD Connect, where you have to go and run it yourself. If it doesn't, you have to run start AD sync cycle on the server so that you can easily push updates of users to the cloud. Uh, so let's look at a case study or a scenario that can explain the advantage of Cloud Sync. So now the case study we have here is this. This is MJ. So let's say she purchased, she's the owner of this forex. So this is a forex. She owned this forex and she owned this forex. So this is print, this is photo. This forex now, they are not in any way connected to each other. They are not connected to each other. So now these guys now use AD sync use AD connect to sync their users to this tenant. So she bought this particular company. So all she needs to do is for her to actually establish a forest trust relationship from this forest to this forest. It's not easy because you have to set up network connectivity from this forest to this forest in an ideal, in a professional way. So if you set up like a network connectivity between these two forex, that's when you can even manage them using to set up like you don't actually need to set up a connectivity because it works in disconnected forex. So it can give you this. maybe for instance now your company wants to buy another company and they want to sync users from that domain to their Entra ID. All they just need to do is to install Cloud Sync Agent on that environment. Cloud Sync Agent does the syncing to the Entra ID that they want it to do the syncing to. So that's what we have on the screen. So let's go. So now, like I said earlier, that I'm going to explain password hash synchronization and what it is. I'm going to still talk about
Yeah.
pass-through. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emmanuel. I think this is 9:52. You really covered a whole lot, a whole lot. I think we have a continuation of this class tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m., right? So that we can answer some questions from the topics you've discussed today. Thank you so much for that. So we'll start the class tomorrow with the password hash synchronization. We have quite a number of questions, I think. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Yeah. So someone is asking, where do I take it from? Do I ask what is a forest? Yeah. So they would like to know what a forest is. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So I thought
Okay.
you want to ask more questions. So that was why I was like, okay, let me wait for you to
Okay.
finish asking. So
Okay.
like let me just define the forex in a way that at least to be easy for for us to understand. So in a Active Directory setting now, a forex now, let me even start from scratch. If you want to create, if you want to install ADDS rule for the first time in an environment, so there are three options it gives you. Either you want to join an existing domain, or you want to add to an existing domain, or add a domain to an existing forest, or create a new forest. So a forest now in this sense is the boundary, is the security boundary in an environment, just like the way we have different countries. So we have Nigeria, we have Ghana, we have Egypt. So that boundary now that differentiates Nigeria and Ghana, so that's the forex. So in Nigeria now you now have different states, such as let's say Lagos, Niger, and different states. So those are domains that you can have under Nigeria as a forest, which is the security boundary. So that's just my own way of explaining forex in a very clear, in a simple way that let's say our audience can understand. I don't know if MJ wants to help me add something to it so that let's say it could be clearer so everybody can gain from it small.
Okay, Emmanuel, thank you. Okay, so seriously, if you for the beginners, really, I think I will just write on what Emmanuel said to in the example of say when you look at Nigeria as an example, or let us just imagine that before Nigeria ever became a country where you have houses and all of that. You know, if you go to a place, maybe for the first time, what you will see, I'm trying to bring it down to the layman also to say probably maybe is a forest you will see. And you know that when before Nigeria became a few days ago, we're celebrating independence. Well, that means we fought to say, okay, this is Nigeria, is a forest. And the way I can explain it to be that to be that phrase like Ghana today, before you can go into Ghana or before you can even go outside Nigeria, you need to present your passport. So what makes you present that passport is because it is a kind of a boundary you cannot do what you cannot overstep. You can't overstep Ghana, just enter that way. At the immigration office, they will check your what? Your passports. The same way also, when you describe an Active Directory forest, you are saying, someone has already put it and say, you are saying that it is the security boundary and the administrative boundary of the Active Directory, meaning that you cannot overstep your boundary, so to say. So whatever objects you have in that Active Directory, and then that is still called the forest, it is managed just within that Active Directory. It's managed within that forest. So at the end of the day, they are all secured, they are all administered by what is, somebody was asking for what is a domain controller. To be honest, the topic is quite wide, and that's why I'm feeling for you guys, because I think it's a lot of information, to be honest. And because if no matter how we break it, it will still be, some people will still have, okay, so what do you understand as a domain controller? But let me just say, it suffice that the very first time you come into an Active Directory environment, it is called what? A forest. The same way you come into Nigeria, whatever part of Nigeria you are in, it will, if somebody asks you and you're a foreigner, yes, where are you? We say you're in Nigeria. Then probably maybe you can now start breaking it down to say, okay, I'm in Lagos, Nigeria. In that Lagos, Nigeria, we will now see how it defines what things like probably maybe a domain. So inside a forest, you will see a domain inside, and you can see multiple domains. I'm trying to break it down, but the truth is that is for you guys, it might be too much of an information. Just take the forest as a security boundary, just like you are in Nigeria today. Nobody can come. You have the sovereignty. So the forests also have the sovereignty of the users or the containers or the objects that are inside it. So that's why it is called what, the security boundary of an Active Directory environment. So that's what a forest is. I mean, it's it's a lot of information, but I hope you can help. I mean, all right, Emmanuel, I think that's the most I can help you there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma. Thank you, ma.
Okay, I think Rafiah, you want to go on or what? Hello.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure she's
I think she
active.
lost
I'm
connection.
not sure she's
Oh,
active.
okay. All right.
So
I think there was a question I just waited to answer, and I think even the forest is not wait, because there are so many questions they've asked that some other things have covered it. So somebody was asking that what is the difference between Hyper-V and virtual machines? Okay, so it's not the topic of today. Well, because Emmanuel went into an Hyper-V environment, I think that's why you're asking, because you heard him kept saying VMs, which is virtual machine. So let me use an example. Let me just use an example here, if it will help you. How many of you has ever wished that you're in two places at a time? How many of you? You know, a lot of us, what we intend to be, sometimes you will say, oh, I wish I'm in this place. I wish you're in this place, you know. Sometimes you wish you're in two places at a time. Why that might be possible, why that might be impossible for us as human beings, for computers, they can actually achieve that. And the way they can achieve that, it is with this concept that is called what? virtualization. So let me break down virtualization in a way that everyone can understand. Now, virtualization is like, the best way I can describe would be like a magic strip for computers. Where a situation where you have one particular computer splitting itself into many smaller computers, so to say. So let's call those smaller computers to say uh, pretending or duplicating computers. That's what it is. So those duplicating or pretending computers is what we can refer to as what? Virtual machines. And they can run different tasks on their own as if they were separate physical machines. So that's the concept of what? Virtualization. Virtualization is that technology, is a technology that allows one physical machine to split itself into what? Smaller cores, or slice itself into other computers also. And those other smaller computers can act on their own as if they are physical machines. So think about it like you have a big mansion, and each mansion has like, you have a big mansion. Inside that mansion, you have different rooms. That's another example I'm giving you. And each of that room, they can be decorated for their own specific use. The function of one room may not affect the other one. So those smaller rooms that you have in the mansion are called what? Virtual machines. Why the mansion itself on its own is what is referred to as the physical server, or another word you call it what? The host. And why you call it the host is because it is housing other rooms in it, which are referred to as virtual machines. So have that concept. Now, you understand what virtual machines is right now, I believe. Now, what now allows that virtualization or the computer to perform that trick is what is referred to as a software. And that software is what is called hypervisor. So think about it. If you've ever seen a magician in those days, I remember when we were small, that we used to watch. Is it Circus? There was that program that you find that, I think it's Circus. If I can still remember it. And then you find that some magicians will wait and they have one stick in their hand. And once they turn those stick, you can see that maybe once they turn the stick, multiple birds will come out, or you can see handkerchief coming out and all of that. So that magic itself, that probably maybe a magician has just one bird with it, but when he turns that stick on that bird, it makes the bird to be more than one. That stick is what you can call what? Your hypervisor. Is that hypervisor that allows virtual machines to be created. It's that hypervisor that is like a software that runs on any server that you want to do what? Enable virtualization on. Remember that I've already given you a background of virtualization. So virtualization allows us to create what? Virtual machines. We've understood that one. But what really is behind we being able to create virtual machines is what is referred to as what? Hypervisor. Now, there are different hypervisor in the market. There are different OEMs of what? When I say OEMs, I'm talking about vendors that play in the virtualization space. One of them is Microsoft. You have VMware. You have Citrix. I think you have, which other one? But I know we have VMware, we have Citrix. So for the virtualization, for Microsoft Hypervisor, their own is what? Called Hyper-V. I think for VMware, it's called, I think it's actually VMware, it's called what? Is it EX? Whether the name of the company itself is VMware, yes, I'm trying to remember now. So those are the different virtualizations. So for Microsoft, his own hypervisor is called what? Hyper-V. Now, when Emmanuel was talking, some other people were asking question, what is roles? Now, for every server that is bought or for every server you installed on your network, you want to define the job of that server. Now, the job of that server is what is referred to as what? Roles. Now, I can install one Windows server on my network and I say, oh, your own job will be for what? Will be for email services. So you are going to be for email services. I install another server on my network and I say, oh, you, this server, your own work will be for file services. Now I install another server on my network. I say, you, this server, your own will be for identity management. As the list go on, you can install your server. So the job a server performs on the network is referred as roles. Now, for a Windows server that you have installed, it can perform multiple roles depending on what you want it to do. Now, for it to perform the role of an Hyper-V, all you need to go is what Emmanuel was showing you then, that you go to Server Manager and go and add it as a role. So if I say probably maybe I install a Windows server today and I said I want you to be, I want to use it for the purpose of virtualization. All I need to go is go into my server manager once I have installed the operating system of that server, of that Windows server, go into my roles and go and enable it for what? Hyper-V role, because that's what will allow me to do virtualization. If I also decide and say this particular server, I want you to be automatically giving IP addresses out to computers on my network instead of me assigning IP address me manually, I can still go on to that same server and add what is called what? The DHCP server rule. So depending on the role you want a server to act on the network, we actually, or the job or the function I mean, you want the server to act on the network is what you give it what you assign a role to, and you do that through what? Server manager. Do you get? So if you want to learn more, I think your search could be how do I add roles in Windows Server, or how do I add Hyper-V role in Windows Server, so you can learn. And then if you know how to install a Windows Server, then you can do that. Sure you get. Now, the difference, coming back to your question, what is the difference between Hyper-V and virtual machine? Hyper-V is that technology that is Microsoft's own virtualization technology, which is riding on the software we call what? Hypervisor. And then what does it allow you to do? It allows you to do what? To be able to create what? Virtual machines. Now, virtual machines, from my analogy before, are those pretending computers, or those computers that are sliced out or splitted out from one physical machine, and then they are what? Pretending to be what? That they are pretending to be a physical machine on their own also. Just take virtual machines to be what? Machines that they can act on their own. And that's why they are called what? Virtual, because you cannot see them physically. They are running on top of the physical machine. So that's what virtual machines are. But the technology that allows you to be able to do that is what? Is virtualization. And the software that virtualization is using in the Windows environment, or even not, virtualization is using, is what is called what? Hypervisor. But Microsoft names his own what? Hyper-V. So that's just the difference. What the difference between Hyper-V and then virtual machines. So that being said, now I see another question that says, what is a domain? I'm trying to answer some of your questions one after the other. Now, we've talked about the forest. And when we make mention of the forest, we say a forest is what? Is the security boundary of the Active Directory. So we say to ourselves today, Nigeria is the forest. Now look at a domain as every state in Nigeria. And for a domain environment, think of it like every state. In every state, they do what? They have their own words, their own residents. I won't say it is citizen, because citizens are everyone in Nigeria. So for every domain, so you have Lagos State as its own domain. Sometimes you might even have it that some things, some rules may apply in Lagos State and may not apply in Ogun State. Why? You can see last month in Lagos State, you may go to Ogun State and may not see something like that. You get. So a domain, also think of it from your own family background. You hear people say, hey, don't come to my domain. Don't reach my space. Don't come to my domain. So you hear such kind of slang sometimes. It is more like this is my own circle, so to say. So think about a domain as an authoritative boundary. Do you get? We say a forest is what? A security boundary. Then we say a domain is what? An authoritative boundary. Why is it an authoritative boundary? Because every users that come into that domain is what every object that is created in that domain are actually authorized by what is called a domain controller. Let me bring it down again, apart from the state. So you see like a state now, Lagos State is a domain, Ogun State is a domain on its own. Every one of us in Lagos State are answerable to Sanwo-Olu. Everybody in Ogun State are also answerable to who? The governor of the state. So you have, that is why it is what an authoritative. So when we talk about who has the authoritative, the authority over the people in Lagos State, so to say, they will say, oh, the rules of the governor you have to follow. Before you cascade to say maybe you now want to go on the federal level. Do you get? So look at it in that same way. If the state level is making it difficult for you to understand, let's come down to your own house. If you come to my family today, Toriola family, you will see that is our own domain. Oyimafu's family is another domain. Every one of us in that family, we bear the surname what? Toriola. Everybody in Oyimafu's family bear the what? Oyimafu, that's their own surname. But we have our individual identity as what? In that same family, in the domain. So look at the domain as the authoritative domain where the only person that has authority over me or every one of us in my family is who? Is the father, who is what? The domain controller. Do you get? The domain controller is the one that keeps or manages every object in the domain. So we say the domain is what? An authoritative boundary. We say the forest is the security boundary because it's higher. It is like Nigeria. So the security has the forest has authority or rule over every domain. And that's why you can have multiple domains. We can decide to have just one domain. You can have multiple domains in a forest. Just the same way you can have many states in Nigeria. Do you get? So then when you now look at the domain, I still want to liken it to the family because it's easier for you to understand. As a Toriola, I cannot do what? I cannot overstep my boundary and go into an Oyimafu's family and start giving them orders. It is impossible. And that is why you hear people use the slangs most of the time. Stay in your domain. Stay in your lane. Don't cross my domain. It is still the same concept that is used in Active Directory because for each of us in the domain, we have what is called what? A domain controller who is like the father of the house that everybody is what? Responding to, or everybody is being, that's giving everybody that authoritative guideline, or is the one that is authoritative over every object in the forest or in the forest, so to say, in the domain. So I have I have the domain. That's an example of the domain. Then inside the domain, you have to have what is called what? A domain controller. And like I said, the domain controller is responsible for what? For taking care of for administering the objects. And the objects here can be what? The users, the computers, or the devices in that domain. Then Oyimafu also made mention of what? DNS. The DNS server. I know he said so many things and some people were asking. You cannot have a domain without a DNS server. because the DNS server is what does what name resolution. So what I like a DNS server is to be just the same way you have a domain controller who is the father. You have the DNS server as what? As the mother. The mother is the one that says who is the father of the child in any family, right? So the DNS is also the person that says, oh, this object, so though he is known in this name, but this is his IP on the network, or this is who he is on the network. So let's take it back to school. Every one of us, while we were at school, we have what is called a matriculation number, and we also have a name. While I was in school, my old teacher used to come to my class and say 055. Nobody tells me that is Toriola that Olajumoke they are talking about. The same way that your ID is what represents you. So for every object in an Active Directory, they are known by either a name or an IP address. Now, that name, IP address, you will say, I don't know whether some of you would have seen IP address to be something like 192.168.1.1, all those things are IP address. If you have not been taught before, please go look for what is called an IP address. I might not be able to overemphasize it. But for every object you have in an Active Directory environment or in a domain or in a forest, whichever one you want to think about, it has what is called what? A name and an IP address. It is known by something. Just the same way, like I said, while I was in school, I was known by my matriculation number and at the same time as my name. If my lecturer comes to the class and says 055, I don't need to look around. I know that is MJ they are talking about. So the same thing, when an object is being queried or searched for in an Active Directory environment or in the network, for computers, we know that computers only understand 1 and 0. We all know that. So, but human beings, it is difficult for us to remember 1 and 0. How many objects will you remember in an Active Directory environment on your domain with their IP address? So that is why DNS is introduced. The same way, like I'm saying, DNS is like the mother of the Active Directory. It is good we say, oh, this person, this is his father. So the same way DNS, we look at it and say, oh, if you are looking for 055, it is MJ. That is the same way it's doing that. By the time I search for Oyimafu Emmanuel in Active Directory, it will, or maybe a computer, let me say, what's the name of that computer you did on the, maybe let's say my computer is computer 112. Immediately I type it on the network. I say PC 112. Immediately I type it. What the DNS will do for me, which is the DNS server, it will do what? It will say, oh, that's computer you have called. This is his IP address. So that's why we say DNS does what? Name resolution. That's one thing. Another thing it does is that you see that name, which is the domain name, which is like Toriola, which is our own family name. Oyimafu, which is his own name. I'm seeing another person on here that is Kalu. Kalu may be like your own family name. Everybody other than you in your family have their own unique name. So in my family, you can see a Yinka, you can see a Bimbo, but everybody will still have a Toriola because Toriola is like our parent name. And that is like our domain. Every one of us in Nigeria today is what is seen as a Nigerian citizen. That is what is common to every one of us. However, we have our own unique state of origin. Do you get? So the same way for that name, which is what the Nigeria, if it was to be written or to be converted to what is called 1 and 0, it is what a DNS is what we help you to do it. Or a DNS is also the one that will say, oh, even though we are all Nigeria, but there is a state of origin for me that is called Ogun State. Is the one that we know that is from Ogun that I came. So look at a DNS server that also does resolution for the domain name in the forest. As I said before, you can have multiple domains in a forest. just like you can have multiple states in a country. So what does the name resolution is what a DNS server. So, and there is no way you can have a domain without what a DNS server, which also is like, I use the word, see it as the mother, look at the domain controller as the father. It is, you know, your mother does not give you is a name for you to bear. It is the father that gives you the name to bear. So just like the domain controller, assume that domain name is the one that will give everybody on the network what the domain for you to bear. So those are the different examples. The Active Directory is quite wide. If I knew, probably maybe I would have just told them, take them only on Active Directory today if that is what you want to discuss, so that it can be easier for them. But it is not too bad. Whatever information you've taken here, by the time you're reading or you're going online to go and solve and then get some more information, you can marry it and say, okay, oh, Emmanuel said this. You can see how this works. So just take it. I know some other resources will be shared with you, maybe resources on Microsoft Learn, or even if you go to Google, look at how you can install Active Directory or how you can install and what is a Windows server. Start from that. Start from what is the concept of a server and a client. And then when you finish from that, the difference between a server and a client, then you can now come to a place of saying what is what are the Windows servers in Microsoft. Then you can now look, then you can, by that, after you've gotten that, then you can now search for what are roles and features in Windows Server. All the things Emmanuel have said today about Active Directory domain services, which is ADDS, because I hear him call a lot of acronyms, but maybe people don't know what it stands for. Active Directory domain services, it is just a server role that allows you to promote a machine as an Active Directory server. Do you get? It's a role on Windows that allows you to do what? Promote a machine to be what? An Active Directory server. And when we talk about an Active Directory server, is an what? An identity management server. That's what it is. So a lot of the terminologies that have been used today, I know that it will take you time to understand, but watch this video, do your research also, and I'm sure we'll give you some other resources also to complement the learning. Lastly, someone was asking, what is the difference between a domain and a work group? Which is where you start from. Now, you have let's say in your house now, all of you have you have 5 people in your house. Each of you have what? Your PC. As you have your PC, as all of you have your PC, you are doing what? You are in a work group. But let's assume the 5 of you in that your house are employed in a company. But when you come into the company, they want to be able to centrally manage all of the PC. Do you get? In your house, while all of you are 5 people and each of you have your PC, nobody is managing you. You are the administrator of your PC. You can do and undo on the PC. You can install, you can uninstall, you can do anything on your own on the PC. You have a whole total control on your PC, just like the remaining 4 people in your house. But let's assume I open a company and the name of the company is Olajumoke PLC. And then I now say, okay, all of you come and work for me. But by the time you come in to work for me, I look at it and say, no, I want to be able to centrally manage all of you and be able to do what prevents you from installing or doing anything on your PC. Then I will introduce what is called what? A domain. Remember what I said. A domain is a what? An authoritative what? Boundary. It means I want to be able to have an authority over all of your PC. So I bring you away from when you were on your PC, you were in work group. All of you and your group. So you have how many if I look at the properties of your machine, is work group. If I look for the properties of the other one, is in work group. But what did I do now? I now introduce what is called a domain. Whatever name I want to give my domain, let's say I want to give my domain name to be olajumoke.com. That is the name of a domain. Do you get? It's a domain name. Olajumoke.com. You see some other people, just like google.com, is a domain name. Now, or you see Microsoft.com is a domain name. But I now decided to say my own is olajumoke.com. Now, for me to establish that olajumoke.com, I need to install the what? The Active Directory Domain Services role. That is why I said I have a Windows server. I go to my tools, to my server manager under tools. I will see manage. No, not under tools, sorry. I will see under server manager, I will see manage, and I can now select add or remove roles. Immediately I click that, it will give me the opportunity to look at the roles that are on the machine. One of it is what? Active Directory Domain Services. Now with it, I can introduce a domain, and that domain name will now be olajumoke.com. What I will now do is that each of you, your machine that is in a work group, I will now join you to my domain, because what? I want to be able to what? Centrally manage you. Do you get? Now I'll manage each of you. I can put control over your PC, whereas I can say, oh, this is what you're allowed to install. This is what you're allowed to do on your machine and all of that. I can decide to say, oh, as even though you guys are 5, I split you into maybe what later on I want to manage you. I put you, let's say 5 of you. One PC goes to a sales department, another PC goes to what? IT department, another PC go to what they call it, account department. Maybe I do all of you like that. But one of the things that we also put in place, which Emmanuel mentioned, is what? Organization units. So I can now say, oh, organization units, I want this organization unit is like a container for you to what? To represent each of my departments. I can now decide to say, okay, user 1 and PC 1 belongs to what? To sales department. So I create an OU, which is called what? Organization units. I put it in the chat with the what it stands for. It is like saying that I'm creating a container to say, okay, you user, this container is called what? Sales department. Because I want to put you in sales department, I carry you and put you inside. I look at user B and I said, user B, I want to put you in IT department. I create another organization unit. Inside that's my domain. So think of your organization unit as your local government. You see the way we're coming down now. We talked about forest. Forest is what? What they call it. Your forest is like Nigeria. Your domain is what? Your state. Inside the state, you have your local government. So I say, okay, now this local government, but I'm saying your organization units right now, I'm putting them as what? But I also still put them as what? Department. I can use various examples for you so that you can understand. So I create organization units that is what? Representing each department in my organization. I have IT department, I have sales department, I have marketing department, I have admin department. I now carry each of those users, or as they are coming as I'm employing more, and I take them to their what? Different OUs. Why? Because I may decide to do what? Apply a policy to say, oh, for these users that are salespeople, you can do what? You can use USB. That is USB on your machine. But for these users that are in IT, I do not want you to use USB. So you see, what the organization unit allows you to do is that apart from helping you to centrally manage objects in your network or in your domain, it also allows you to apply policy when necessary to the different OUs or to the different objects you have in your domain. So that is just like rounding up what Emmanuel has said so far with Active Directory and all of that, and then giving you understanding of virtualization is a lot of topic. If it was that, if it is that we have time, the first thing I would have asked them to do is that, no, first take them through virtualization. Since you are going to talk on virtualization, take them through what virtualization is, and then if they know how to now create their own virtual environment, Then let's now go to Windows Server, and then you can talk about Active Directory. When you now know how to create Active Directory, you can now relay it to it. Okay, so when it goes to Microsoft Entra, so this is the same way they were creating users. The same way you create users on premise is similar to the same way you create users on what? In Microsoft Entra. So forget the fact that you go to, for some of you, we say, but I have always created user on Office 365. That's where in the admin center. That admin center, the backend, when you are creating the user, is actually what? Your Microsoft Entra. That's where the user is actually going to. Just that place that you see admin center that says username is actually going to where? It's the Microsoft Entra. It just gave you an interface for you to create a user there. Where the user is actually stored is Microsoft Entra. So you can now be able to understand and relate with it. But I believe that bit is what I can help you guys with. To be honest, I know it's a lot, but we will get there. It's not one day you're going to understand everything, but as also you to apply yourself to what has been taught, you will get it. So I see two people's hands up. Emmanuel, I'm not taking your show. It's your show. Yeah.
Thank you, ma. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think.
All right. So you can go on. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, ma. We really appreciate you, ma. So the mentees, can we just give a reaction to MG for that wonderful explanation? We just give some reaction to her. So thank you very much, ma. Thank you, ma. So we'll be rounding up today. Let's try and fill the attendance form. It's closing 11:15 this night. So let's join tomorrow, same time, same station tomorrow. So we'll continue with our class. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you.